The man hurriedly rushed into the house on a cold night, his face filled with frenzied fear and despair, still holding a kitchen knife stained with the blood of his best friend's wife. No one could have guessed that the cause of the crime had originated from a party between two close-knit families in the peaceful town of Pine Hill. An idea for a seemingly harmless game was proposed. It was unexpected that this daring game would result in a complex love square, plunging them into a whirlpool of suffering, betrayal, and hatred. The consequence was a horrifying murder that shook the entire community. So what caused Daniel, once a model and kind husband, to become a murderer with the mindset of a madman? And how did Linda, a gentle teacher loved by everyone, turn into a demon in human disguise with cunning schemes that baffled the police? This story will unveil the dark secrets hidden behind the innocent facade of wife-swapping games, where love, trust, and friendship are betrayed and destroyed. Daniel and Linda had been married for 10 years, and to everyone around them, they appeared to be the perfect couple. Daniel was a sophisticated man with a successful career as an architect, renowned for his creative and captivating designs. Linda, on the other hand, was a beloved third-grade teacher, cherished by both her students and colleagues. They lived in a beautiful house on Maple Street, with a lush garden meticulously maintained by Linda herself. On the surface, their married life seemed happy and stable. 5 years ago, Mark and Jennifer Johnson moved to Pine Hill and quickly became close friends with the Garner family. Mark was a financial advisor, sociable and friendly, always the humorous center of any gathering. Jennifer was equally adored for her cheerful personality and radiant beauty. The Johnson family brought a fresh breeze to the Garner household, frequently hosting house parties and going out together on weekends. The two families grew increasingly close, treating each other like siblings. However, this seemingly beautiful friendship became the catalyst for Jennifer's tragic death. During a party at Daniel and Linda's home, perhaps fueled by alcohol or the openness of all four individuals, the exciting game of wife-swapping was proposed, a rather novel concept at the time. Astonishingly, instead of being shocked or opposed, all four were enthusiastic and eager to discuss it further. In the following weeks, the idea was taken more seriously, with all parties agreeing on boundaries and rules to ensure that their family happiness would remain unaffected. The first night of spouse swapping between the two families was awkward yet thrilling. Their hearts raced with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The experience was both tense and enchanting, leaving them yearning to do it again. What began as a small experiment gradually became a familiar part of their lives. The novelty and excitement of this game reignited their marital bonds, making them feel happier and more connected, as if rediscovering something lost. However, subtle yet noticeable changes began to emerge not long after, particularly in Daniel's behavior. He gradually showed a special interest in Jennifer, always finding reasons to be alone with her. Linda noticed this change in her husband but chose to remain silent, hoping it was just a temporary feeling. Mark, too, failed to recognize the growing tension. Unbeknownst to anyone, Daniel's infatuation with Jennifer was becoming deeper and more concerning each day. Daniel often thought about Jennifer, his mind filled with memories of them together. His desire to be close to her grew stronger, and his passion for her transcended mere friendship, becoming an obsession that dominated his thoughts. During work meetings or family dinners, his mind wandered incessantly to moments spent with Jennifer. His once passionate love for architectural projects now paled in comparison to his yearning to be near her. He sought every opportunity to be closer to Jennifer, volunteering for tasks that would put him near her, or frequently inviting the Johnson family over. Linda began to sense the significant change in her husband. Initially, she thought it was just excitement from their new lifestyle, but soon realized that Daniel's attention towards Jennifer had surpassed that of a friend. He became irritable and distant when the Johnsons were not around, and his conversations often revolved solely around Jennifer's interests and habits. One evening, after tidying up after dinner, Linda decided to have a serious talk with Daniel. However, Daniel reacted irritably, accusing her suspicions of being blind jealousy. Not wanting to disrupt the fragile balance they had built, Linda set the matter aside, but started to observe her husband more closely. Her suspicions grew stronger as she noticed Daniel becoming increasingly intimate with Jennifer during gatherings, unusually frequent touches and conversations that felt more like those between lovers. Feeling uneasy, Jennifer decided to confide in Mark about her discomfort. However, he dismissed it, believing Daniel was simply an affectionate person. Mark's indifference left Jennifer feeling lonely and anxious, unsure of how to handle the escalating situation. Daniel's growing obsession with Jennifer compelled her to decide that she needed to end the relationship before it destroyed both families' marriages. Eventually, Jennifer couldn't bear it any longer and decided to share everything with Linda. Hearing Jennifer's words, Linda's heart shattered. Despite the pain of discovering her husband's feelings for her best friend, she tried to remain calm and sought to talk to Daniel, hoping to bring him back. However, Linda's advice did not make Daniel see reason. On the contrary, he became even more obsessed with Jennifer. He began stalking her, sending fervent and affectionate messages, continuously professing a love he believed was destined. Daniel's obsession spiraled out of control, threatening to destroy everything they had built together. Worried for her safety, Jennifer decided she needed to meet Daniel one last time. She hoped that this conversation would make him realize the consequences of his troubling actions. They arranged to meet in a secluded park. Jennifer firmly reiterated to Daniel that the game was over and that he needed to end his feelings for her for the sake of both families' happiness. Daniel's eyes showed pain and dissatisfaction. Jennifer's resolute refusal felt like a dagger piercing his heart. He felt betrayed, believing she was mocking his feelings. Unbeknownst to them, Linda had secretly followed Daniel to the park. From a hidden corner, she watched the entire confrontation, her heart pounding as she witnessed the argument between her husband and Jennifer. On Daniel's face, she saw clear signs of anguish and despair, while Jennifer's eyes were filled with determination and resolve. As the argument intensified, Daniel's despair turned into rage. Jennifer's rejection struck a blow to his self-esteem, making him feel deeply betrayed. He shouted, using abusive language and accusing her of ruining his life. From the shadows, Linda realized the situation was spiraling out of control and knew she had to act before it was too late. She quickly approached and loudly called out to her husband. Daniel was startled by Linda's sudden appearance, his eyes showing confusion upon seeing his wife. Seizing the opportunity, Jennifer swiftly left the scene. The atmosphere between Daniel and Linda grew heavy, like an impending storm. Linda tried to comfort her husband, assuring him they would overcome this challenge together, but deep down, she knew their lives would never return to what they once were. Daniel returned home in a state of panic and anxiety. Jennifer's decisive rejection, coupled with Linda's unexpected appearance at the park, left his mind in chaos. He felt deceived and betrayed. Anger, disappointment, and sorrow tore at his soul. Linda looked into her husband's despondent eyes, seeing the confusion and pain within him. All her attempts to console him seemed ineffective, unable to soothe the anguish gnawing at Daniel's heart. Jennifer's resolute refusal had pushed him to the brink of complete collapse. In the following days, Linda felt the growing distance between them. Worry weighed heavily on her, but she felt powerless, unsure how to bring Daniel back to his former self. She knew that if things continued, he would eventually cause trouble. Meanwhile, Jennifer tried to avoid Daniel, hoping to return to a normal life with Mark. She immersed herself in work, keeping everything a secret from her husband, to prevent him from worrying and to preserve the friendship between the two families. Jennifer hoped that her determination would make Daniel realize his mistake and let go. However, Daniel's presence continued to linger in her life. An uneasy feeling lingered within her. That uneasy feeling became a reality one evening when, returning home, she was horrified to find Daniel waiting right outside her house. Jennifer's heart raced wildly, as if trying to escape her chest. She realized she couldn't avoid this confrontation any longer. Taking a deep breath, she tried to remain calm, approached Daniel, and firmly demanded that he leave immediately. Daniel's eyes were red with desperation and madness. He begged her for a chance to explain, his voice filled with urgency. Jennifer felt fear wash over her, trying to slip past him into the house, but Daniel quickly grabbed her hand, preventing her from moving forward. Jennifer's anxiety heightened as she saw the madness in his eyes. "Let me go," she shouted, struggling to free herself from his grip. Her panicked screams shattered the quiet of the neighborhood, attracting curious glances from neighbors peeking out of windows and some stepping onto their porches to see what was happening. Realizing he was becoming the center of attention, Daniel released Jennifer and fled in a panic. Jennifer entered her house with trembling hands. Her heart pounded fiercely as she leaned against the door to regain her composure. She grabbed her phone and called Linda. Jennifer's frightened and shaky voice made Linda extremely worried. Hearing what had happened, Linda understood that things had gone too far. She knew she had to act immediately to prevent the situation from worsening. The next day, Linda and Jennifer met at a small coffee shop. When Jennifer walked in, Linda immediately noticed the exhaustion and worry etched on her face from a sleepless night, her mind clearly still haunted by the previous night's events. With a trembling voice, Jennifer shared her terrifying encounter with Daniel the night before. She recounted every detail, from his mad eyes to the fear she felt when he refused to let go. Linda listened silently, her heart heavy as she recognized Daniel's madness. In her mind, she kept thinking about how to help both Jennifer and Daniel overcome this crisis. After Jennifer finished her story, Linda promised to have an honest conversation with Daniel, hoping he would see reason and stop. After their meeting, Linda returned home to find Daniel pacing back and forth, looking anxious. She confronted him about what happened with Jennifer, her voice a mix of anger and worry. Feeling cornered, Daniel erupted in anger, accusing her of siding with Jennifer and betraying him. The argument quickly escalated. Seeing the uncontrollable rage in Daniel's eyes, Linda decided to retreat to the bedroom. That night, darkness enveloped not only the room, but also Daniel's mind. He couldn't accept that Jennifer had rejected him and that his wife had turned against him. His distorted thoughts began to take over, and in a state of delirium, he concluded that if he couldn't have Jennifer, then no one could have her. On a cold night, Daniel quietly approached the Johnson family's house. He knew that Mark was on a business trip, leaving Jennifer alone in the quiet home. Sneaking in through the side window, Daniel carefully made his way to the bedroom where Jennifer was sleeping. Watching her lie peacefully ignited a storm of rage and despair within Daniel. He grabbed a kitchen knife and approached the bed with a mind torn between love and hatred. Suddenly, Jennifer woke up, spotting him with the knife gleaming in the darkness. She tried to scream, but Daniel swiftly covered her mouth with a strong hand. Without hesitation, Daniel forcefully plunged the knife into Jennifer's chest, instantly ending her life. Dark red blood spread across the pristine white sheets. It was only because of the blind jealousy of a deranged man that Jennifer, a gentle wife and a cherished friend, was gone forever. After committing the horrendous act, Daniel panicked and fled, his hands still stained with blood. He returned home trembling, his mind in turmoil from fear and guilt. When Linda saw her husband in that state, she immediately understood that he had done something terrible. Although horrified by what Daniel had done, in a panic, Linda decided to help him cover up the truth. She was fully aware that they were facing an extremely dangerous situation where everything could collapse. Their reputation, careers, and the happy life they had painstakingly built. Linda knew she had no other choice. She had to act quickly and decisively to protect what was left of their lives. She led Daniel into the bathroom, instructing him to remove his clothes and wash away the bloodstains. Daniel stood under the hot shower, the water turning pink around his legs. Linda gathered his clothes and discreetly placed them in a plastic bag. She carefully wiped clean the floor where he had walked, ensuring no traces were left behind. Once Daniel had finished bathing, she forced him to recount every detail of what had happened. Though still in panic, Daniel tried to explain his malicious actions to his wife. Linda, determined to protect her husband blindly, began outlining a detailed plan. She understood that they needed to create a perfect alibi and destroy all evidence related to the crime. First, she called a close friend living on the neighboring street whom she completely trusted, pretending that Daniel had been with her all evening. In this way, she ensured their alibi evidence was successfully established. Linda drove to a remote area on the outskirts of town. She burned Daniel's blood-stained clothes along with the weapon shortly after. She prayed that the flames would incinerate all evidence, erasing any traces that could link them to the heinous crime. Upon receiving the report of the case, the police quickly began their investigation. They visited each house in the neighborhood, including Linda and Daniel's home. Like the other neighbors, Linda maintained her composure, answering all questions naturally while skillfully creating an alibi for her husband. Although internally worried, Daniel tried to hide his emotions, appearing calm in front of the police. With no clues related to the case found at their home, the police left without suspicion. When the door closed behind them, Linda and Daniel breathed a sigh of relief, feeling as though they had just lifted a huge burden. However, both understood that from that moment on, they had to live in deceit and constant fear. Daniel lived in obsession over what he had done, believing that the police were tracking his every move, causing him to isolate himself and avoid everyone around him. Linda, although appearing calm and composed on the outside, was constantly worried inside. The horrific secret weighed on her like a heavy stone, making her vigilant to every glance and word. She had to play the role of a normal wife every day, hiding her deep anxiety and fearing that the truth would be exposed at any moment. Each night, as darkness fell, both sank into torment and relentless anxiety, not knowing where the future would take them. Linda not only tried to stay calm herself, but also helped Daniel control his disturbed emotions. They carefully maintained their image, striving to appear as normal as everyone else, as if nothing had happened. Every day, she kept up with news about the murder case, praying that the police would never uncover the truth. Although the police had no new leads, Linda knew they couldn't rely solely on their alibi. They needed a more sophisticated plan to divert the investigation. She discussed with Daniel, suggesting they pretend to be grieving Jennifer's death like the other neighbors to avoid suspicion. Daniel began to feign sorrow and regret over Jennifer's passing. He frequently mentioned her with sad eyes and a voice full of anguish. Even in social gatherings, he didn't hesitate to shed tears and deliberately sighed to show a deep sense of loss. Meanwhile, Jennifer's husband was still immersed in pain and despair, completely trusting Daniel without any suspicion. He didn't know that two friends he trusted were hiding a horrific secret behind their feigned, sorrowful appearance. But the fear haunting Daniel day and night made him increasingly unstable and mentally deteriorating. Each night, continuous nightmares tormented him, and his eyes often showed panic. To forget his guilt, Daniel turned to alcohol, but drunkenness only temporarily helped him escape. Every time he sobered up, the torment inside him grew more intense. Linda feared that her husband would lose control or confess while drunk, so she always kept a close watch and took care of him, hoping to help him regain his composure. One night, in a drunken state, Daniel began to cry, saying he couldn't endure the torment any longer and wanted to go to the police to confess. Linda panicked, trying to soothe her husband, fearing that everything they had tried to hide would be exposed. Seeing Daniel's condition worsening, Linda suggested a trip far from home to help him escape his obsession. They chose a small, quiet cabin in the mountains, away from the town's noise, hoping that the natural environment would bring the necessary peace to Daniel. Amidst the serene mountain scenery, the couple found a rare moment of peace. Taking advantage of this time, Linda and Daniel carefully discussed and planned to conceal their crime more perfectly. Linda reminded her husband to keep the secret absolutely, not revealing even a single detail. She also guided him on how to respond when encountering the police and how to behave naturally to avoid suspicion when interacting with others. After the trip, Daniel and Linda returned to town, continuing their lives with a fabricated facade. Daniel had learned to better control his emotions, no longer displaying odd or anxious behavior as before. He tried to blend into daily life without drawing attention. Linda, with her subtlety, always presented herself as a model wife in the eyes of the community. She participated in social activities, interacted amicably with neighbors, building trust and affection from those around her. Her thoughtfulness and enthusiasm ensured that no one suspected the secret they were hiding. Both of them, like excellent actors on the stage of life, concealed the truth behind smiles and sincere words. They created a picture of a happy family, diverting every curious gaze. However, the perfect facade they built gradually began to show cracks. Friends and neighbors started noticing that Daniel was sinking deeper into alcohol, and his behavior became erratic. Whispers began to spread within the community, raising suspicions that he might be involved in Jennifer's death. Linda clearly sensed that the situation was gradually getting out of control. Although she tried to cover up the rumors spreading in the community, deep down, she knew that the truth could not be hidden forever. Her greatest fear became reality when the police continued their investigation and discovered new evidence. These findings showed that the alibi evidence Linda had created for Daniel was fabricated. In a final effort to uncover the truth, Inspector Mattel decided to interrogate Daniel and Linda separately. She carefully noted every minute detail, paying attention to their every expression and word. During the interrogations, Mattel noticed inconsistencies in their testimonies. However, the police were not in a hurry to draw conclusions, as the alibi evidence Linda had constructed was too flawless, without any flaws. Daniel also performed excellently, just like a friend, genuinely grieving the loss of a loved one. Although everything seemed reasonable, Inspector Mattel couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her heart. She was convinced that Daniel was hiding a dark secret. Eventually, all their efforts to cover up Daniel and Linda's crimes were shattered when the police gathered additional evidence from the phone and the testimony of a key witness. This witness stated that they saw Daniel's car parked near the victim's house on the night of the crime, and his behavior at that time was highly suspicious. This testimony, combined with data from the phone, provided sufficient grounds for the police to obtain a search warrant for Daniel's house. During the search, the police accidentally discovered traces that Linda had thought she had completely erased. Under the floorboards, they found deeply embedded bloodstains, despite her meticulous cleaning. Elsewhere, fragments of burned clothing emerged, serving as undeniable evidence. Realizing that time was running out, Linda understood that the only way to avoid a long-term prison sentence was to devise a new plan. A sophisticated plan that could shift the blame away from them and onto someone else. In her mind, Linda began to craft bold steps, hoping to turn the tide before it was too late. But Daniel could no longer keep his composure. The new evidence the police had gathered panicked him. The lies he and Linda had once constructed now felt like a double-edged sword, turning back to stab them. Inspector Meitel decided to summon Daniel for another interrogation. This time, she no longer used persuasive language, but directly presented the undeniable evidence. The history of harassing calls and messages, the testimony of the witness who saw his car near the crime scene on the night of the incident, and the autopsy results matching details only the perpetrator would know. Faced with clear daylight evidence, Daniel felt extreme fear. Words choked in his throat as he couldn't find any reason to justify himself, his whole body trembling. Inspector Meitel told him, "If you come forward with the truth, your sentence may be reduced." Faced with clear daylight evidence, Daniel felt extreme fear. Words choked in his throat as he couldn't find any reason to justify himself, his whole body trembling. Inspector Meitel told him, "If you come forward with the truth, your sentence may be reduced." He revealed that Linda had also been an accomplice in the crime. Daniel recounted how Linda had helped him clean up the scene, destroy evidence to avoid detection, and even create fake clues to frame others. Immediately, Linda was summoned to the station for interrogation. At first, she adamantly denied all accusations, maintaining her stance when facing the harsh questions from the police. However, when investigator Meitel presented new evidence and the undeniable testimony from her husband, she realized that all efforts to cover up the truth had become futile. The long-standing lies were gradually being exposed under the meticulous investigation. Ultimately, with no other choice, Linda confessed her role in helping her husband carry out the crime. She justified her wrongful actions by claiming they stemmed from her intense love for her husband and the fear of losing everything she cherished. The case of the couple Daniel and Linda sent shockwaves throughout the town. When the trial day arrived, the courtroom was packed with attendees. All eyes were on the trial, eager to witness the conclusion of this tragic story of love, betrayal, jealousy, and crime. In the trial, Daniel was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, while Linda, for her role as an accomplice and participation in covering up the crime, was sentenced to 15 years in prison. However, thanks to her remorseful attitude and active cooperation during the investigation, Linda had the opportunity to receive a pardon after serving 10 years of her sentence. Although justice was ultimately served, the question remains whether this sentence could alleviate the pain and loss that the victim and her family had to endure. Jennifer's husband, having lost both his wife and his closest friend, would undoubtedly carry the haunting memories for the rest of his life. Please share your thoughts on this case in the comments below. Don't forget to support the channel by leaving a like and subscribing so we can bring you more quality true crime stories.